Hello and welcome to the Princess Margaret Secondary International Baccalaureate Report Card. We hope that this little YouTube tutorial will help you understand your student's report card in a meaningful way. So at the very top, you're going to notice their name, you're going to notice their grade, as well as their student pen number. And much like most report cards, there is an attendance record. So you can see that this student here was absent 1 day in September and 1 day in November for 2 total. And this will be a running tally throughout the year. So you can notice the number of days that your student is both absent or late, and those meaningfully do impact their success in school. So something to take a look at. The first page was designed by our administration to sort of explain what you're going to see on this report card. So it's kind of the fine print. So one thing I'll draw your attention to, and we're going to go into this in more detail in a moment, is that each subject will report out on 4 criteria specific to that subject by the end of the course. And we're going to go into more detail on that in a moment, but basically every course, students are graded on 4 specific criteria, which is quite a good thing. The second thing I want to draw your attention to is the approaches to learning, or ATLs. And basically what ATLs are, and they're down here at the bottom of the page, are replacing what we would call work habits in the past. Now, there's about 150 approaches to learning that we are very much trying to have a coordinated effort to teach students. And those skills might be time management skills. They might be how to keep your own calendar. They may be how to take notes. So we're really interested in the whole child learning experience here at Princess Margaret, where we're not just learning the facts. Those are very important, but we're also learning skills to help students do better. So what you're going to notice is that the ATL skills are divided into novice, learner, practitioner, and expert. So what you'll notice is that your student may have learner or may have novice attached to an ATL. If they're a novice, it means the student rarely uses these skills. If they're a learner, they're using these skills if they're asked, and they can demonstrate that. All the way up to expert, where the student shows how to use these skills and self-assesses their usage. What we're attempting to do here is this whole child approach where students are ready with 21st century skills to really face any problems that will come at them in the future. One thing you'll notice, though, is that your student may be novice or learner or practitioner now. It is very difficult to get expert on your first term report card because we're really about trending in the IB. How do you trend up? How do you demonstrate mastery? And so at the very end of the year, we don't really take into account if they were a novice in first term, if they're an expert all the way in the last term of the course, because they really have achieved that level. So keep in mind that you may see things here, but students will typically trend up as they learn and develop and demonstrate these skills. So as we scroll down on the report card, you're going to notice that arts education is right here. The student this semester is also taking language and literature, which replaces English. So I'm going to show you a small PowerPoint. I'm going to jump back and forth between these so that we can take a look. So in the MYP, courses are called by different names. So the subject group language and literature, for instance, is what we would have called English in the past. And then there's language acquisition, which may be a French, Spanish class, something of that nature. Individuals and society is what we used to call social studies or history. Science, math, arts, physical, health and education, similar. And design would be sort of the wood shop or metal shop. So each of these subjects groups are divided into criterion, and there's criterion A, B, C, and D. Now, typically, in courses in British Columbia and elsewhere, we've really focused as teachers on knowing and understanding. Do you know the skills associated with this course? Do you know the facts, etc.? And the IB seeks to create more well-rounded students who can not only know and understand the facts, but can also investigate and research, can communicate their message, and think critically. And each one of these criterion is evaluated on an 8-point scale. So incomplete might be no work submitted yet, or maybe the criterion wasn't assessed during this time frame. So if the student's getting a 7 or an 8, it means they completely meet the subject-specific objectives. If they're getting a 5 or 6, they're mostly meeting them all the way down to 1 or a 2. Now, a big change in the MYP from traditional learning is that these don't equate to a percentage. So a 4 out of 8 does not mean that the student's getting 50%. In fact, a 2 is a pass. So that's about a 50% where they're emergent. They still need a bit of work, all the way down to a 1 where they're not really meeting any of the criteria yet. So MYP grades, the really neat thing about them is they really shouldn't be a surprise to students. Students will know how they're being graded. They'll get rubrics and criteria beforehand, and they're in a 1 to 8 manner, which replaces the traditional A to F letter grades. Now, the cool thing about this is a B in the past, student would have gotten a B, but there's no real descriptor with that. And a B from one teacher to the other could mean something different. MYP grades are standardized across the entire continuum. So students will know if they were in a private school that was an MYP school in Germany, getting an English language education, a 4 there is the same as a 4 here in British Columbia. So students will actually have a descriptor and they'll know exactly where they're at and where they're going to get to. So for instance, this is criteria A for knowing and understanding for individuals and societies year 5. If a student's at a 3, they're using some terminology accurately and appropriately. And that descriptor is important because instead of just giving a kid a grade, they know exactly what to do to get to a 5 and 6. They need to use a range of terminology accurately and appropriately, all the way up to a 7 or 8. They're consistently using a wide range of terminology effectively. So what we're seeing at our school is this great transformation where students actually know what grades they're getting, why they're getting them, and how to move to that next level in a very clear and concise way. What I love about this particular slide is it reminds us that an IB grade should never be a mystery. Students should know where they're at and how to get to that next level. For those of us that are interested in how it converts to a traditional letter grade, just to give you a frame of reference, 7 and an 8 are about an A, 5 and 6 are Bs, 3 and a 4 would be your C, C minus, C plus range, and a 2 would be a C minus or a bare pass. What I like about this is this scale only has one way of telling a student with one number that they're not meeting objectives. In some school districts in the United States, a 60% is a fail. So there's actually 60 ways to tell a kid they're not doing well and only 40 ways to tell them that they're achieving. So here are the approaches to learning, and this student is demonstrating that they're a learner, a practitioner, and a learner. So if we were to go back briefly and look, what do those actually mean at the very front of the report card? And it would tell us, we'll go on this one, that they're a learner. So this student uses these skills if they are demonstrated or specifically asked, whereas where they're a practitioner, they're often demonstrating these skills effectively without being asked. Now, if this student wanted to move up to expert, he's going to have to show others how to use those skills and then self-assess his or her own usage in order to sort of move on. You're going to notice their current trends, and that can change by the end of the course. As they improve, they maybe end up being practitioners or experts. So we're looking at the trend at the very end of the course, and that sort of final grade is what's really important because it demonstrates their learning. Here, under criterion A, knowing and understanding, these terms right here match exactly every rubric that student should have been getting. So they're using a wide range or a range of terminology accurately and appropriately. They're getting a 5. If they wanted to move up to that 7 or 8, they would then have to go, what ways do I get there? Well, if I want to move to a 7 or 8, I have to consistently use them more effectively. If you want to look at a peek in a teacher's grade book, there's criterion A, B, C, and D, like we mentioned for each course. Criterion A, this student here, we can look in the teacher's grade book, has been assessed twice. On a formative assessment where the teacher is just seeing where they're at with a snapshot, they got a 5. And then they eventually got a 6 on a summative assessment at the end of the term that may have brought that skill to the front. So at the end of the year, the teacher is going to look and go, you know what? Where they're at now is a 6. I'm not going to divide these two and give them a 5.5. I'm not going to penalize them for when they were learning. I'm going to give them the grade they deserve and where they're at now. For criterion B, it looks like the student nearly got a fail here on that formative assessment, or at 50%, but they really got it eventually and did a good job. So they're going to have a 5 as their overall grade for that term. Now, what we do is, because this is an 8-point scale, and this student got 6 out of 8, 5 out of 8, 4 out of 8, 5 out of 8, what we're going to do is we're going to add this up, and it looks like they got 20. So at the end of the year, we're going to look, and there's an overall level of achievement that's out of 7 that they're going to get. So we're going to add up and go 20 is in this range overall. So that students at a 20, they basically have a 5 out of 7 as an overall level of achievement at the very end of the course. If you'd like to know more and you're wondering and you have any questions about the report card and how it's different from the traditional one, you can leave comments below in our YouTube page, or you can contact the school, Mr. Weeb, Mr. Fitton, Miss Bevington, Mr. Evans, or Mr. Bond. One thing you'll notice about this report card is that it still does have a description of what's going on in the course. as well as a comment in general about the student at the end. And this is really what our former report card was. So the good thing about the IB report card, it has a great deal of information. It's going to tell you exactly where your kids are at, but more importantly, where they get to go. So one of the big changes, if I leave you today with that, is that we are looking at overall trends. How are students learning over time? Where are they at now? And we're not going to penalize them for where they were at before. Thank you very much for your time. Have a great day.